If you need something to write with, you can come get it. Okay. Question number 1. I give you a graph and you have to give me the equation and tell me the domain and the range. Before we even get started, you should be able to easily tell me the domain because what is it? All real numbers every time. So get that one right. Question number 5. It's on here too. We haven't graphed it, but I'm going to jot down. I already know the domain is all real numbers. For question number 1, and you have a graph, you have 2 questions. These are the 2 open-ended questions, or 2 of the open-ended questions on your quiz. I give you one with a graph and one where you have to make the graph. So don't just leave anything blank. You can at least figure out some of the things. So the vertex, remember the vertex is the very bottom or the very top of your graph. So this one is a vertex. Would you call that a maximum or a minimum point? Yeah, you'd call it a minimum point because it's at the bottom. There's a question on your quiz and it's a multiple choice question and it goes through and it's saying so-and-so has this equation, what's true about it? Then it says things like, oh, the vertex is this. Oh, the maximum point is this. So keep in mind that like a positive graph isn't going to have a maximum. It's going to have a minimum. So keep that in mind. All right, for the vertex. Vertex is what you see is what you get. Like it's how you get to this point. You don't change anything. The only time that signs change are when you're going from a vertex to an equation or from an equation to a vertex. That is the only time that you change the sign when you're dealing with the H part. So for the vertex, how do I get to this point? How do you get here? I think I'm hearing it. -4, -2. That scares me. -4, -2. That's a huge part of your quiz. You've got to be able to figure out a vertex. You got to be able to figure out a vertex from a graph, and you got to be able to figure out a vertex from an equation. Like that's a few questions on the quiz. And for those of you that have been listening and pay attention and taking notes and doing homework, you should be like, yes, because that's easy. Axis of symmetry. It's not drawn on there, but you can draw it. Symmetry. What is symmetry? Same, right? So it's where that graph would fold in half. So I don't care if you draw it on there, you can, or you don't have to, but you do have to be able to identify what that line is. So it's where your graph would cut in half. It's always an x equals, and it's x equals wherever it cuts through the x. If you forget if it's x equals or y equals, well, you can look at the axis and it'll be labeled. It'll say x. So you can remember it's an x equals, it cuts through the x-axis where? At -4. So your axis of symmetry, that's AOS. X is equal to -4. Transformations. I don't ask you to do this on the quiz. I do ask you about transformations, but not I give you a graph and I ask you. But you should be able to tell me, what did you do? Normally, parent function starts at 0, 0. We didn't start at 0, 0. We moved left 4, and we moved down 2. That's what you jot down for transformations. Left 4, down 2. Before we do the equation, let's talk about the range, because the range is easy too. That's another part that you should get correct on the open-ended question. So range, does it go with X or does it go with Y? Y. So every time, and I'm going to put this on number 5 too, you start with Y. At the very least, you start with Y. All right, so you start at your vertex point. Is my graph above the vertex point or is it below the vertex point? Above. So because it's above, we're going to say greater than or equal to, because there's no holes on these graphs. All right, so it's greater than or equal to its lowest point. So what's the lowest point? -2. For my equation, it may not say right on the exact problem, oh, the equation for a quadratic in vertex form is f of x is equal to ax minus h squared plus k. It may not say that directly on the question you're working with, but I promise somewhere in the quiz, it gives you this form, this formula. So if it's not exactly where you're working, flip to the problem where it does give you that formula so that you don't make a mistake. You need 2 things to make an equation. What are they? You need an X and a Y. We call it H and K. It's the vertex. We need a vertex. What else? It's one of these letters. A. So you need 2 things. 2 things. You need an A, and then H and K are together. That's the vertex. So remember, the vertex is H comma K, and then A. We didn't find A on here, but I ask you on yours, I ask you, is it facing up or down? That should give you an indication that, oh, she wants me to find A. So if you're facing up, A is positive. If it's facing down, then that A is going to have a negative sign in front. You figure out A by the very first movement. Here, I go over 1, up 1. So what is A? 1. If I go over 1 and then up 4, what would A be? 4. If I go over 1 and up 3, what would A be? 3. Okay, you figure it out from the very first movement. That tells you A. So for this one, we go over 1 and up 1. So our A is 1. I didn't have a spot to put that. I'm just going to jot it down over here. A is equal to 1. To write my equation, I'm going to have that form. F of x equals, and keep in mind, an equation needs an equal sign. So you either have to have it as f of x or y equals. I don't care if it's f of x or y, but you have to have one of them equals or it's not an equation. Okay, f of x equals. Then the next piece, I'm going to have an A, I'm going to have parentheses, something squared, and if I need to, I'll put something at the end. So I'll have parentheses, something squared, and x. All right, in front of the parentheses, what do I put? I put a 1. Do I have to write the 1? No, but I can. Doesn't matter. You can put it or not put it, doesn't matter. In the parentheses, this goes with the x value of your vertex. So what do I put in here? Keep in mind, it says negative. So this is the only one that's opposite. It's only when you're putting in or taking out of the equation. So what goes here? Positive 4. And that's only with the parentheses. And then after is the K piece. What you see is what you get, minus 2. The whole goal here was to be able to write an equation. Even if you struggle with the equation, if the only thing you get wrong is that you put this in incorrectly, you can get all the other pieces. Please make sure that you don't skip any of the parts. Try and do everything. All right, question number 5. I give it to you in vertex form. I ask you to state the transformations. Okay, you have to do this on the quiz. I think you have one that's a multiple choice question maybe, and one that's open-ended. So the open-ended one's pretty easy. These three parts here are the only movements you're gonna have, and you may not even have them all. So the only thing you might be doing, the thing in front of the parentheses, that reflects you, or it stretches you. You could do both, or you could do one or the other. This is always with the X, so it's an X movement. The X axis is this way, so it's left and right. The thing at the end, well, if this is moving you at left and right, then the thing at the end moves you up and down, whatever number you have there. So if we're stating our transformations, what does this negative in front of parentheses tell me? Facing down. Okay, so we're going to call that a reflection. Reflect over X. You could also state opens down. What does this +2, how does that move me? Left 2. Remember, everything in parentheses is opposite. So left 2. And then what does +4 at the end tell me? Up 4. Again, this is 2 questions on your quiz. It is a multiple choice question. It might be written in function notation, but it's the same pieces. They move the same. And then one, I give you the equation and I ask you just jot these things down for me. We are going to list some things to be able to graph. Let's list. We know that it's going to open down. So A is a negative something. It's a negative what? -1. Let's see, what's the vertex? Yeah, you're right. -2, 4. That's basically what I need to graph to. I need to know what A is, and I need to know what my vertex is. Same 2 things that I need to write an equation. I'm first going to go plot my vertex. I'm going to go over left 2 and then down, up 4. Left 2, up 4. I'm going to open down. Anytime I open down, I'm going to give myself a reminder. Oh yeah, when you plot that, open down. Another way, and this is just a hint, this isn't always, this is a lot of the time, enough that it's worth mentioning, that typically I could move you left or right and I'm indifferent with that. So that doesn't really do anything. But up and down, typically, if your graph goes down, I'm going to have it facing up because you have more room to plot points. And typically, if I have your graph move up, it's probably going to face down because you have more room to plot points. The one exception for those of you that, this isn't always, it's just most of the time. Question number 7. Raise your hand if you did question number 7. I probably would have faced it the other direction so you could plot more points. So if you noticed and you graphed it, it was just a little sliver that you got to put on the graph. Anyways, so that is an exception. And then question 6, for those of you that did your graph, that's an exception too. So anyways, more often than not, I would say majority of the questions on here where there's any kind of graphing, if you moved up, it's probably because your graph is going to face down. And if you move down, it's probably because your graph is going to face up. And not always, but enough of the time that it's worth noting. From here, we're going to do those movements. It says that A is a value of 1. So it's going to move the same as this one, where we go over 1, 1 squared is 1, over 2, 2 squared is 4. Shake your head if you remember those movements where it's 1, and then 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9. So it's 1, 4, 9. Sometimes they don't all fit. We just plot as much as we can. So over 1, and then down 1, over 2. So this is what I'm doing from the vertex. Over 1, 1 squared is 1. Over 2, 2 squared is 4, so I go down to there, 4. 3 squared is 9. Is it going to fit? Yeah, it is going to fit. When you plot your graph, please be careful and make sure that it looks like a U and not like a V. So make sure that your vertex is curvy, not pointy. You want to connect your dots, and what do you want to do at the ends? What do you want to put at the end of your graph? Arrows, because it goes on forever. You use symmetry to get this half of your graph. For the range, you can always start from your vertex. Is your graph above or below? Below. So below means less than or equal to. And then what's the highest that it goes? 4. That is it for question 5 and the front. Flipping over to question 7. So question 7 had you do a few things. It had you write in vertex form. To write in vertex form, what do you have to do? What is the method that we use to take something that looks like this and put it in vertex form? Completing the square. So to complete the square, remember that we write it out. We have f of x equals, you've got your 2 parts. You've got your x parts, and then your other part that's going to make up your k. So we get x squared minus 2x, and we leave a blank, plus 7, and we leave a blank. This is going to give me my 2 parts to my equation. To figure out the magic number that goes inside of my blank, I have to do b divided by 2, all of that squared. The b value is the middle value, so that's 2. Doesn't matter if you do -2, because when you square it, it will become positive. So we can do 2 divided by 2 squared. So what's 2 divided by 2? 1. What's 1 times 1? What? 1. So remember that here we're going to do plus 1 minus 1. Plus 1 minus 1. Now I'm ready to write in vertex form. You will always have parentheses, something squared. We didn't factor anything out, so there's nothing in front of my parentheses. To figure out what goes inside, you look at the middle number. What is half of -2? -1. And then I have 7 minus 1. 6. You have a question on the quiz, and I ask you to complete the square. Guess what? If you really suck at completing the square, it's a multiple choice question. So you could, and this would take a lot more time than I would want to spend on a question, but you could take your answer choices and FOIL this out. It'd be x minus 1 times x minus 1. You get your answer for that, and you subtract 6. You could figure out which one of your answer choices gives you what you started with. Again, this is much faster, but you could do that. Part B asks for the vertex. So what is the vertex? 1, 6. Remember, when you take it out or put it in the equation, the h value changes, but that's the only time. C asks you for the y-intercept. The y-intercept you get from this original equation, it is 7. The other way you could get a y-intercept is if you graphed it. If you graphed it, you can figure out the y-intercept as well. Y is equal to 7. You could also write a y-intercept as a point I will tell you that your vertex, if you don't put parentheses around it, I'm taking off points because it's a coordinate. It has to have points. All right, now we're ready to graph. So we're going to go plot our vertex. Remember, to graph, you need two things. You need a vertex and you need to know A. We didn't list A, but what is it? What's in front of those parentheses? 1. A is equal to 1. It's also positive, so I'm going to have a graph. It's going to face up. I'm going to go plot my vertex. My vertex is at 1, 6, over 1, up to 6. This is what I was saying. I didn't really leave myself all that much room to make my graph. From my vertex, I'm going to move by squaring the x values. So I go over 1. 1 squared is 1. I would go over 2. 2 squared is 4. I already fell off my graph. I would make sure that my graph is nice and curvy. Please make sure that you plot points. Some of you, when you're graphing, you have a thin little mechanical pencil and you just make wisps of a line. Be bold with your line, make little dots, and then be confident as you plot your graph. I didn't ask you, but what would the domain of this one be? All real numbers. The range would be y, and then my graph is above, so y is greater than or equal to 6. The next one I want us to go over is question 13. So flip it over. We're going to look at question 13. And we're going to look at A and B. So we already talked about this a little bit, the transformations. And this is just in function notation. You have a question where you have to write something using function notation too. So when I look at this one, what does this +2 tell me? Left 2. What does the -3 tell me? Down 3. Let's do the same thing for part B. What does the negative tell me? Facing down, so it opens down. Or you could also say reflect over X. Either one of those mean the same thing. Don't just say down. If you say down, I'm thinking that you're moving your graph down. You have to make sure that you're more specific. Tell me that it opens down. What does the 2 tell me? It's stretched or it's getting thinner. You could use either one of those words. Or more narrow. It's stretching you to the sky. You get to the sky faster. What does the +4 tell me? Up 4. All right, again, I ask you a question on your quiz. It's open-ended. You've got to be able to write these things down. Now we have to write it in vertex form. Again, I don't see vertex form here, but you could go dig it out and find it somewhere on the quiz. You can find f of x is equal to a x minus h squared plus k. And there's 3 places where you're going to put values if there is a value. So for the first one, you're going to have parentheses, something squared, and an x inside. Does anything go in front of the parentheses? No, because there's nothing in front. Inside the parentheses is exactly what it looks like. You're going to have an x plus 2. After the parentheses, exactly what it looks like, minus 3. Nothing changes because you are dealing with something in function notation and you're putting it as a function. You're not taking a vertex and making it an equation or taking an equation and making it a vertex. That's the only time. So here it is exactly the same. Nothing changes. So when you see these problems, again, you should be like, yes, because they're easy. They're not meant to be tricky. What you see is what you get. You do not change anything. This one, going to set it up the same thing. I'm going to have an f of x equals, I'm going to have some parentheses. It's going to be squared. What do I see in front of parentheses? I see a -2. That's what I'm going to put. -2. What do I see in parentheses? Just an x. So I leave it as just x. After parentheses, I see +4. So I'll put +4. That's it. Do not overcomplicate it. Do not switch anything. It is exactly the way you see it. Questions over these questions? All right, we got one more that we're going to go over together. It's question number 15. I ask you a question and it's exactly like this. Write an equation using the given information. I give you a vertex and I give you a point. On this question, I am quite certain that I give you I give you vertex form. So f of x is equal to a x minus h squared plus k. What is the same thing as f of x? What does that mean? What's another way that we call that? What's another name for that? There's two things that you can call it, and they're interchangeable. Y equals. Pretty sure on the quiz I actually give it to you as y equals. I'm going to change it. I'm going to put it y. When you have a vertex and you have a point, you should label them. So your vertex is h and k. Your point is x and y. This was on our first homework. You're going to plug everything in and solve for A. We're going to plug everything in and solve for A. So when we plug this stuff in, I know that y is 2. We're solving for A. X is -5. H is -3, but when I put it in the equation, has to be opposite, so +3. K +6. Again, anytime you put in or take out of the equation, you've got to change the H. All right, I have everything plugged in and I'm going to solve for A. When I solve for A, first thing that I have to do right now and on your quiz is get rid of whatever K is. So I'm adding 6 on this side. I need to bring it over and subtract 6. I have 2 minus 6. What's 2 minus 6? -4 is equal to A. Let's go ahead and evaluate what's inside the parentheses. I have -5 plus 3. So I'll get -2 in here. I have one last step. So all I need to do is get A by itself. So I need to divide by -2 squared. Well, what's -2 times -2? +4. So I'm going to divide by +4. So A is equal to what's -4 divided by +4? -1. So to write an equation, I need a vertex, which was given, and A. Those are the two things I need to write an equation. I already have the form of the equation. It's given to you in the problem. So I get y is equal to, now I have the A value, it's -1. Honestly, you don't have to write -1. You could just write negative. It may show up like that on the quiz. X opposite H, so +3. And then +6. All right, we did a question like everything you're going to see on the quiz. So I'm going to pass out quizzes. If you've been absent and you're not going to take the quiz, that's fine, but you're going to have to come in next class during lunch and you can take the quiz. But if I was you, I just gave you a review over everything. So if I was you and you feel good about it, 6 questions are multiple choice, I would probably try and take the quiz because there's not a whole lot of time. So we have also last quiz corrections that you can do. When you're done with the quiz, you might need to finish up any of your homeworks or the practice worksheet. I said we're not going to grade them today, so don't stress out about it. We're going to grade them next class so that we have more time. And then you have a new mystery picture. Yes, we still have mystery pictures because we have to learn how to plot points.